TorahCafe.com.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for supporting the land of Israel and for coming to support the Israelis and for connecting to Judaism and for being part of Chabad. Okay, I have two books. So my first book is called The Blessing of a Broken Heart. And that I wrote right after Kobe was murdered, the first year after Kobe was murdered. And my new book is Resilience. It's called The Road to Resilience. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about resilience because my husband and I are really ordinary people, but we were faced with an extraordinary challenge. And the question was really, how were we going to not only survive after Kobe's murder? He was, in 2001, he was 13. He was our oldest child, and we had 3 other little kids. And how were we going to be parents to our children? So, in fact, after he was killed, after we found out that he was murdered, I fell to the ground, and I looked at my husband and I said, what are we going to do? How are we ever going to live with this? And he looked at me, Seth, and he said, we have 3 other children. And because the terrorists killed Kobe, we're not going to let them destroy us. So what I'm talking about here, it's our story, but it's also the Jewish story. And it's also your story. So during the Shiva, I really felt like I did not want to live. I did not know how I would ever live again. And a few weeks later, it was Kobe's birthday. He was killed on May 8th, and his birthday was June 14th. He would have been 14. Now, a 13-year-old sounds like a young kid, but actually, Kobe, to me, he was really smart. Like, I personally thought he was a genius, and I kept waiting for his teachers to mention that to me. And, like, nothing. But to me, he knew everything. He understood the stock market. Like, we didn't have any money in the stock market, but he did from his bar mitzvah. And he knew what was going on there. And he also, when I would drive, he would say, oh, you have to go into 3rd gear now. Like, what? How could you possibly know that? So he was always ahead of, I felt like he was always a little ahead of me. And in a way, he still is, because he's in heaven, and he's still connected to us. And I feel that in a lot of ways, he's still leading us, and he's still guiding us. And he kind of shows us some miracles along the way. So on his 13th birthday, I didn't know what to do. It turned out in Tekoa, I have a friend named Shira. She taught English at that point, but she was also a grief counselor, and she had studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who, when I speak now to college students, nobody knows who she is. She's totally, they're like clueless. But I assume most of you know that she talked about the 5 steps of, it's not really grieving, it was the 5 steps of dying. People misunderstand that. Anyway, she came to me and she said that I had to do something for Kobe's birthday. She said, if you don't do something to celebrate it, to mark it, it will mark you. It can destroy you. And we didn't know what to do. We had no idea what to do because I was like, I felt like a dead person. And actually, a lot of bereaved mothers tell me this, that you want to die. You really want to die, but you don't. So I was with my kids. My oldest at that point was 12. And we went to downtown Jerusalem. We thought we would go to Burger King because it's kosher here. And we had lived in America. So for Kobe, I mean, that's what he loved the best, was going out for hamburgers. In fact, he loved to eat. He loved to eat meat. And on the computer, on the screen, it said, he had put this, "I'm hungry. Give me something to eat now." Like, he was 13. He was always hungry. So we thought, okay, we'll go to Burger King for Kobe. But we couldn't. It was just, we could not go in there. It was too sad. So we went to a vegetarian restaurant, which he would have hated. Like, we were safe there. And the kids went up to order, and I put my head down on the table, and I just started crying. And I thought, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to celebrate Kobe's birthday? And 2 words fell into my head. They just fell into my head. 14 beggars. 14 beggars, because Kobe was going to be 14. And I said to the kids, when they came, after they had ordered, it was cafeteria style, they came back to the table, and I said, I know what we're going to do for Kobe's birthday. We're going to give tzedakah, we're going to give charity to 14 beggars. And I had money in my pocket. I gave them all the money I had. And the minute after I gave them the money, a man came to our table, and he had one of those cards that said that he was deaf and mute and looking for money. And we just poured money at him. We were so happy to see him. We gave him a lot of money, and we were smiling, and he was a little bit in shock, because I think as a beggar you don't usually get such a good reception. But we were so happy to see him. And then after the kids ate, this was in downtown Jerusalem. It was in June of 2001. It was the Intifada. So it was a very hard time in Israel. And there weren't a lot of people out. Usually in Jerusalem, I think you've been down there, usually there's a lot of beggars. Like, basically, I used to try to stay away from them. But now everything was opposite, because we needed them. So we went running after them. We saw one like 2 blocks away. And he was turning around. He was walking away, and we were chasing him, chasing after him. We were chasing beggars. And also my kids were little, so it was really fun to chase these beggars and to give them money. And then we went down on the Midrahov in the outdoor mall on Ben Yehuda, and we saw somebody. He had his leg up. He was sitting on a bench, and we thought he was a beggar. We went running up to him, but he had a broken leg. And you can't say to somebody, "Are you a beggar?" You know, it's like either you are or you're not. So, but we went chasing after beggars, and then we couldn't find enough. We wanted to find 14. We could not find 14. And I really felt like Kobe was with us, because Kobe was so ironic, and he was so funny. And it was like, just when we needed beggars, there weren't enough, and we were begging for beggars. I came home, and I told my husband, Seth, what had happened, and he said that he would go to the kotel the next day and give out the rest of the money. And I realized that Kobe really, he had made us into holy beggars. There's a book by Shlomo Carlebach, and that's the title of the book. It's called The Holy Beggar. Kobe had made us into holy beggars, because the only thing we could do in response to his death was try to give, to create love. And we had to do something that we never would have thought of doing in the past. I mean, before Kobe was killed, believe me, I would not have been chasing beggars. So Kobe's death really transformed us. And my definition of resilience is being transformed, being expanded. The root of resilience in English, it's resalir. It's really to go back to who you were, to leap back. Like, people think that if you have a tragedy and you go back to being exactly who you were, that's successful. But my definition and the Jewish definition of resilience, I believe, is to become greater, because we never want to go back to being who we were. If you go back to who you're being who you were, it's a kind of failure, because in every suffering there's some revelation. And most people think of grief that you want some kind of closure. But actually, in Judaism, we don't look at life as having closure, and we're not looking for our struggles. We don't try to close them. We're not looking for closure. We're looking for disclosure. Disclosure. We're looking for revelation, and we're always trying to find God's light. And sometimes God really shines his light on us. So I feel like even on that story of Kobe's birthday, that thinking of the 14 beggars, it wasn't my thought. It really came from Hashem, I believe. Because after that, every year we went out looking for beggars. And 15, 16, now Kobe would be 29, turning 29. So it got a little bit expensive. And thank God, actually, every year something else has happened where we're too busy really to do that particular ritual. But maybe we'll reinstate it, because it really became something creative and something that gave us happiness and gave a lot of other people happiness. In fact, a year after, when we gave the money to 15 beggars, I remember I started crying. We went to the kotel, and there was a woman beggar, and I told her why we were giving the money. And I hugged her, and she hugged me, and I started crying to her. And there I was, hugging a beggar, crying to her. So very interesting things happen when you open your life and open your world to expanding in a way that you would never have thought of. In my book, this book, it's The Road to Resilience, I talk about the 7 steps of resilience, and they all start with the C. So we won't be able to get through all of the steps here because you're on your way to Hebron, but I'll talk a little bit about it. And we travel a lot to America, so I'm happy to come to your communities to finish talking about this. Okay, the first C is chaos. And most people would rather avoid that step. The first step in facing any conflict, any struggle, is chaos, because you lose control. And we all want another C word that it's not in my book, but we all want to be in control. And chaos means we lose control. And just to give you a very small example of this, I'm sure some of you remember when you would go for a drive and you had to use a map, right? And you had no phone. So I was with my children. They were 4 kids I think it was 3 kids under the age of 5. And we were going to meet my husband, and it was like a 6-hour trip. I hate driving. I mean, I drive, but I don't really like it. And I get nervous. And the kids, well, they were fine, but the dog was in the car, and he really did throw up on my foot while we were driving. Everything was in chaos. And then I thought it was in chaos. Then I had the directions and the phone number on a piece of paper on my lap. Oh, and I think after the dog threw up, I opened the window. The whole paper went flying out the window on the thruway. So I didn't know where we were going. I didn't have the phone number. And I thought that was chaos. But actually, often life sends us these events where there's no map for it. There's just no map. How do you deal with this? And sometimes what I found is that people are really afraid of feeling. And they say, be strong, be strong. And I really think that's a problem. Because why should you be strong when something terrible has happened? I think that you need to be weak then. And you need to feel, well, I don't think it's being weak. It's feeling, allowing yourself to feel. Because if you don't go through the process, if you don't let that chaos in, and I think the chaos it's another word for suffering sometimes. If you don't let the suffering in, it will come chase you the rest of your life. It will come after you. And in fact, I've read studies where it says that psychiatric admissions, 25% of psychiatric admissions are related to grief, to unprocessed grief or complicated grief. So a person has to be able to feel, but often it's too much for an individual or a family to deal with, and that's what happened to us. It was way too much. Our little family, how could we absorb such crisis, such conflict? We were basically new immigrants in Israel. We'd been in Israel for 5 years, and we have no family here. And my Hebrew at that point was pretty pathetic, non-existent. My husband's was a little better. But the community came in to help us. And that's the second C, is community. And, well, the second C is really a K. It's kindness. But I couldn't put kindness because it doesn't start with C. So it's community. But that's what you have here. I mean, that's what Chabad is. Also, part of Chabad is the community. And that's what Jews have, right? We put the community in the center. In fact, in Judaism, it's not like in America where it's the rugged individual and you're not supposed to talk about your troubles and you keep everything hidden. And it's like the hero is the cowboy who rides off into the... Where does he ride? I don't know where he rides. In the wilderness, something like that, to deal with his problems by himself. No, Judaism, we're a community, and the community is supposed to take care of the person who's suffering. And that's what happened to us, that the community came in and took care of us. And they didn't say, what do you need? Because the person who is suffering doesn't know what they need. They don't know. They have no idea. I didn't know what I needed. So they brought food. They did our laundry. They took our kids to school. They decided what we needed. And if I didn't like it, I said no. But of course I liked it because they cooked for us and did the laundry. So that was nice. And they also brought us Shabbos meals for 6 months, which was also very nice. It was very good for me because it got to the point where my husband said after 6 months, I think your cooking is better. So it took 6 months, but okay. At least he reached that. Actually during the Chagim, there was a terrible tragedy in Israel that a man, he was a father, he was on his way to the Shabbat Chatan, I think, for his daughter and new son-in-law, that he was shot and his son was shot, the Littman family. And the wedding was supposed to be the very next week. And we all grieved. The whole country was so in shock and just distraught. And what this young girl did, Sarah Littman, and I know a lot of you know it because I know Rabbi Mandell is here somewhere. I didn't see it, but I know his son came to the wedding. Hi. Good to see you. His son came to the wedding. And people from all over the world, what Sarah Littman did, this young Kala, she opened the wedding to the whole country. And the hundreds and hundreds of people attended, and they came from America, they came from all over the world. I know Sarah Netanyahu was there. And what did she do? She expanded that community, and her community. So it wasn't just her family and her friends, it was all of Israel that supported her. And the transformation was phenomenal. And I think in that way, she was able to find simcha, even though a week before or 2 weeks before, her brother and her father were killed by terrorists. But that's the strength of the Jewish people, that we're able to find our koach, our strength. When we don't have it, we can get it from the community. So I'm just going to end with a story about Kobe. That during the Shiva, Kobe's class came to us, 8th grade boys. And I have to admit, I hated seeing them because I had just had my son, and then my son is dead, and I couldn't bear it. And they came in as a group, and there was one really little boy, and they pushed this boy. They like kicked him and shoved him there. Like one big boy's like, tell him. And I'm telling you, he was like kicking him, this big boy. And this little shy boy came up to us, and he said that he was they'd been in sport in gym class that week. And he said, and I'm not a very good athlete. And I thought, you don't have to tell me, I can see that. But he was so little and so shy and glasses and hunched over. And he said, and Kobe, the teacher made Kobe the captain of the team. Now, you have to understand that when we moved to Israel, Kobe didn't speak Hebrew. And the first summer, I remember I saw him at the library by himself. And I thought, oh, he was so popular in Silver Spring and so happy. And I felt really guilty about bringing him to Israel. And then I thought, you know what? First of all, he loved Israel. And then I said, he'll learn empathy, because you take the kid who's the leader of the class and really make him a nerd. So at the Shiva, this boy said to me, Kobe was he had first pick in volleyball, and he picked me. So my daughter looked at Seth and I, and she said, she whispered, he picked him, because Kobe he loved to win. Like, we lived in Silver Spring, but he rooted for the Dallas Cowboys. He was with the winners. So my husband told this story in Toronto about the volleyball boy. And a boy, like a 16-year-old boy, came in when my husband was speaking. And afterwards, he spoke to my husband in Toronto, and he said, let's call him Michael, the 16-year-old boy. He said, I didn't come to hear your speech, Rabbi Mandell, but I walked in. Came here to play basketball. I walked in, and I heard you tell the story about Kobe and the volleyball boy. And, I'm the best athlete in my class, and my teacher always makes me the captain, and I always pick the best kids. And he said, but you know what? Next time I'm not. I'm not going to pick the best kids. I'll pick the kids who are not so good. And Seth said, fine. And he left. Seth flew back to Israel, and he thought he would never hear from this kid again. And like a week later, we got an email from him, from Michael. And he said, Rabbi Mandel, after you left, the next day, the teacher made me the captain of the team. And I looked around the room, and I picked the boy who was the worst player. And he was so happy. He was thrilled. He was so happy that when I got the next pick, I picked the next worst boy. And he was just as happy. And then I picked the next worst boy. And basically, I got all the losers in the class. I got the worst athletes. And we had a round-robin tournament. And we won our first game. I don't know how we did it. We won the next game. And we won the tournament. Which is a crazy, crazy thing. Crazy. But Seth wrote back and said, I don't know if souls in heaven can cheer on sports teams, but I'm sure if Kobe could, he was cheering you on. And this boy Michael wrote back and said, I felt Kobe with us. So of course there's great sadness, and that sadness will never go away. But resilience has the word. Once after my book was published, I looked at it, and it looked like it said resilience. It looked like there was a typo, and I thought it said resilient. Like they'd spelled it wrong, resilient. And yes, I mean, we read last week's Parsha about Nadav and Avihu, or is it this week's, Nadav and Avihu, that were made silent sometimes when we can't, because there's no language to describe what's happened. But resilient also has the word salience in it. And salience is having a sense of what's important and what's significant. So my blessing to you and to all of us is that when people ask me what they should do in terms of Kobe, well, you know, be involved with the Kobe Mandell Foundation and invite us to speak, but also to become more Jewish, because Kobe really put Judaism in the center of his world in Israel. And my blessing to all of us is that we should put Hashem and Yiddishkeit and Israel in the center of our lives so that we can strengthen ourselves and the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Thank you.